Hey folks, it's me, RiggerM71, and I'm an angsty teenage girl with the superhuman ability to manipulate time. Let's discuss. So I freely admit that I've had Life is Strange sitting in my Steam account for a while, uninstalled, unplayed, and patiently collecting virtual dust. Although it did look interesting, I wasn't quite sure if I'd be able to get into it. My main concern wasn't with the game at all, but rather the fact that I'm a middle-aged man. How am I supposed to relate to a young woman and all the problems associated with, being one? Regardless, I finally decided to give it a chance. After playing the game for an hour or so, I quickly discovered that being a teenage girl is roughly as traumatic an experience as being a teenage boy. Or as I dimly recall, someone should tell me these things. The game is separated into 5 episodes, with each story beginning almost immediately where the last one ends. You play as Max Caulfield, a bright, if not somewhat troubled student attending the prestigious Blackwell Academy in Arcadia Bay, Oregon. Not long after the game begins, she quickly discovers that she has the ability to rewind time and change the outcome of certain events. This ability can have a dramatic effect on the story, simulating what some mathematicians and physicists would call the butterfly effect.
The shorthand is the butterfly effect. A butterfly can flap its wings in Peking, and in Central Park you get rain instead of sunshine.
I can't begin to count how many times during the course of my life I've wished for the ability to do this. Maybe I could avoid dropping that jar of salsa, or stop myself from saying that dumbass thing I've said to any number of people. Or I could just use it to make lots of money. The game handles the effect pretty well and is about as practical as you could probably make it in terms of video game mechanics. Max simply holds up her right hand and time moves backward before your eyes like an old VHS tape. However, as handy as this power is, I began to discover something interesting and unexpected. Being a Time Lord isn't always what it's cracked up to be.
Well, nothing's perfect.
There are certain points in the game where you're allowed to roll back choices you've made. While that sounds great in theory, it sometimes didn't seem to make much difference. The outcome might be different, but you ultimately end up no better off than you were before. It's kind of an interesting comment on the choices we make, the concept of destiny, or fate, or just the simple fact that we're screwed no matter what we do. As for the characters and voice acting, I found it to be pretty top-notch, which makes sense for a game like this because the entire narrative is largely driven by conversations and actions Max has with the people around her. So it has to be good and make you care about your decisions. In fact, without giving away too many spoilers, there's a point where a character actually died in my game and I found myself being more than a bit bothered by it. I briefly thought about starting over and trying to save them, but it would have involved going back pretty far. So I simply just chalked it up to the fact that not only is life strange, it also sometimes sucks. Then I moved on. As for the graphical aspect, there really isn't much to talk about, but then again it isn't the type of game that really needs many bells and whistles to be effective. It is several years old at this point, and will run just fine on a budget gaming system with any DirectX 9 capable card, which these days is pretty much anything made in the last 10 years. Although it seems I've been praising the game pretty hard, it isn't exactly perfect. For instance, there are puzzles where you're forced to put together certain clues in order to proceed to the next section, and I found a couple of them to be somewhat tedious. I usually don't mind puzzles, but when I'm being forced to match little slip of paper A with little slip of paper B, and it isn't working, I tend to get annoyed. Or it could be just the simple fact that I'm a big dummy and it took me longer than it probably should have. Hard to say. Regardless, it's a small complaint, and I did ultimately enjoy working my way through the mystery surrounding Arcadia Bay. It's also worth mentioning that there's a sequel to the game, appropriately titled Life is Strange 2, featuring a completely different story and set of characters. I believe they're still in the process of releasing episodes, so it isn't exactly finished, but maybe I'll try it at some point as well. So I guess that about summarizes my experiences being a teenage girl. As usual, if you found any of this helpful or entertaining, feel free to like or subscribe, dislike if you hated it, or even leave a comment below. And on that note, please take care, and as always, have fun.